You drive past the last gas station without really thinking about it. The sky above rural Tennessee is already fading from orange to purple, the kind of soft, slow sunset you only get when there are more cornfields than streetlights. Your GPS shows nothing but a thin gray ribbon of road curling through empty space. No restaurants, no hotels, just farmland, patches of dark woods, and the occasional sagging barn. You roll down the window, expecting the chirp of crickets, the buzz of late summer insects. You hear nothing. The silence out here feels too thick, like a blanket pressed against your ears. The air itself feels heavier the deeper you drive into Robertson County. For a moment, you wonder if you lost cell signal or if the entire world just pulled a few inches further away. Up ahead, your headlights catch a weathered sign by the side of the narrow road. Adams population 633. Underneath it, somebody has nailed an old piece of wood, hand-painted in fading red letters. Bellwitch Cave Tours. You follow the arrow, because that is why you came here, isn't it? Not for the cave, for the witch, for the haunting that still, over 200 years later, refuses to die. They call it America's most terrifying ghost story. The only haunting in US history that allegedly led to a man's death being officially blamed on a spirit. A case so strange, it dragged in preachers, skeptics, neighbors, and even, according to some accounts, a future president. Other hauntings are whispers. This one spoke back. Tonight, we are going deep into the legend of the Bell Witch. If you think you know haunted houses, if you think you have heard every possession story, every poltergeist cliché, leave those expectations at the edge of this field. Because whatever came for the Bell family was not shy. It was not subtle, and it did not stay in the shadows. It walked their halls. It learned their names. It argued theology with ministers and sang hymns better than the congregation. It knew secrets no one alive should have known. It predicted deaths, claimed to cause one, and then, as if that wasn't enough, it promised to come back. And people say it kept its word. The year is 1804, when John Bell moves his family to northern Middle Tennessee, settling on the rich dark land near the Red River, in what would later become the little town of Adams. Back then, it was just frontier, rolling fields, patches of dense forests, and a scattering of small farms. John is a respectable man, a farmer, a husband, a father. He buys 300 acres and a little log house. Over the years, he prospers, adding more land and building a bigger home. Neighbors respect him. He becomes an elder in the Red River Baptist Church, a pillar of the community. If you stood at the edge of his property in those days, you would see a picture-perfect early 19th century farm life. Cornfields, livestock, children running between the house and barn. You would have no idea that his name was about to become a curse word in his own home. By 1817, John is in his mid-50s. His wife, Lucy, is known for her kindness and piety. They have several children, including their daughter Betsy, just entering her teenage years. That summer or early fall, John is walking his fields when he sees something that doesn't fit. A strange animal stands at the edge of the corn rows. He squint. It looks like a dog, but its head is wrong. The face is too blunt, almost like a rabbit or some other small animal jammed onto a dog's body. It stands there, unnaturally still, eyes shining in the fading light. John Bell is not a superstitious man. He lifts his gun and fires. The creature vanishes, no yelp, no body, no trace. He tells himself he missed. He is still telling himself that days later, when the knocking starts, it begins at night after everyone is in bed. A hard, solid rapping on the outside walls of the house. Not wind rattling loose boards, not branches brushing knuckles. Fists, blows, thudding along the logs, traveling from one side of the cabin to the other. John grabs his gun and rushes out into the yard with his sons, shouting for whoever is out there to show themselves. The night answers with silence. No footprints in the dirt dot. No running figures. Just the echo of their own breath. They go back inside, shaken but determined not to make a big deal of it. The next night, it is louder. The next week, it is every night. The Bells start sleeping in shifts, half the family awake while the others rest, hoping to catch the prankster they are sure must be responsible. More than once, they throw the door open mid-knock, sprinting around the house with lanterns held high. They find nothing, and then the sound moves. It comes inside, soft at first, a faint scratching like a rat chewing in the walls. John sets traps. Nothing. The chewing becomes gnawing. The gnawing becomes a sharp clawing, close to their beds, close to their heads. Imagine lying on a straw mattress in the darkness, listening to something scrape the underside of your bed frame. You lean over with a candle, expecting to see a mouse, a squirrel, anything natural. There is nothing there. Now you lie back and try to convince yourself you are not going mad. The covers begin to slide from the children's beds at night as if tugged by invisible hands. Pillows are yanked out from under their heads and tossed to the floor. They hear faint whispers in the dark corners of the room, too low to make out words. Just a sound like someone murmuring angrily behind the walls. At first, John tells his family to keep quiet about it. The last thing he wants is to be the source of wild stories in the community. They pray. They check the house. They double-check doors and windows. They tell themselves it will pass. It does not. It grows. Soon, the scratching inside the walls is joined by something worse. Knocking on the bedposts, fingers rapping the headboards, the sound of a hand slapping a mattress inches away from someone's face in the pitch dark. Then the blankets do not just slide, they are ripped away. Small hands, especially Betsy's, feel sharp slaps from nowhere. Red marks bloom on her arms and cheeks. Her hair is yanked so hard her head snaps back. She cries out, but no one is near her. The bell boys begin to wake with bruises they cannot explain. Voices mumble and hiss right next to their ears, so close they feel breath but cannot make out the language. The family starts sleeping with candles burning low. They take turns watching Betsy at night, terrified at the way she seems to be singled out for the worst of the abuse. Still, the beatings and hair-pulling continue. Imagine being 11 or 12 years old, in the middle of nowhere, in a time when there is no electricity, no phone, no quick way to reach help. Imagine lying awake, knowing that as soon as the last candle is snuffed, something you cannot see is going to hurt you. Night after night after night. Under that kind of pressure, any family would crack. The bells do something John never wanted to do. They ask for help. John confides in a close friend and neighbor, James Johnston, a fellow church member. At first, James is skeptical. It sounds like the kind of tall tale that would travel far and wide if he repeated it. John, tired and embarrassed, invites him to spend the night and see for himself. James and his wife come to the Bell House. They pray with the family, read scripture, laugh a little too loudly at dinner, trying to cut the tension. When the candles are blown out for bed, everyone lies there in the dark, waiting. For a while, the only sound is breathing. Then the old familiar rapping starts, first on the walls, then closer on the bedposts themselves. The blankets are tugged. Something hits James in the face, open-handed, with enough force to sting. He leaps up. By God, he cries, "In the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want?" The sound stops. The darkness seems to press in thicker, listening. Then a low voice, rough and disembodied, growls from somewhere in the room. "I am a spirit. I was once very happy, but have been disturbed." The words fade into an unintelligible mutter. From that night on, the rumors are no longer rumors. They are testimony. The bell which has found its voice. The thing in the bell house does not stay faint or weak, as if it has been waiting for someone to acknowledge it out loud. To draw a line from strange noises to spirit, it grows bolder, louder, more articulate. It starts imitating family members' voices perfectly, calling out to Lucy in the tone of one of her sons from the yard when the boy is standing right next to her, mocking John in his own voice. copying the groan of the family's old ox from the barn in the middle of the sitting room. It sings hymns perfectly, recites long passages of scripture as if it has spent its nights sitting in the back pew of the Red River Baptist Church. It quotes sermons, it prays, it debates theology with visiting ministers, sometimes with more knowledge of chapter and verse than they have. At other times, it is obscene, shrieking curses in a rasping, inhuman register, insulting visitors, mocking the family, especially John and Betsy. It develops a high-pitched, cackling laugh that sends chills down everyone's spine. It seems to know everything. News that has not arrived yet from town. Secrets whispered between neighbors that no one else should know. It repeats conversations word for word that it has no physical way of having heard. Travelers claim that as they approach the Bell home, an invisible voice calls to them from the darkness, greeting them by name, telling them what their business is before they can say a word. Word spreads. Neighbors come to see if the stories are true. Ministers and skeptics arrive to test and challenge the so-called spirit. Instead of shrinking from attention, it revels in it. They start calling it Kate. One of the more popular threads in the story says that the spirit either identified itself as or was associated with a local woman named Kate Batts, who was rumored in the area to be eccentric, even a witch. According to some later accounts, John Bell had been accused of cheating Kate in a land deal, leaving bad blood between the families. Kate, the entity, allegedly said, "Is what you call me. I am old Kate Batts." From that point on, many in the community referred to the belligerent spirit as Kate or the Bell Witch. Whether the real Kate Batts had anything to do with the events or was simply an easy human scapegoat for a supernatural problem remains a point of debate and rumor. What is not debated is how personal the haunting became. The witch seemed to hate John Bell with a special, focused passion. It called him Old Jack Bell and vowed to kill him over and over across the months, across the years. It told anyone who would listen that it intended to torture him and take his life. At the same time, it took a vicious interest in young Betsy. When she began courting a local young man named Joshua Gardner, it seemed to take offense. Every time the two were together, he would scream in Betsy's ears, slap her, pull her hair, and hiss threats. It told her she would never marry Joshua. It told Joshua to leave her alone. Imagine trying to fall in love with someone while an invisible, screaming presence attacks you every time you hold hands. Under that weight, under that constant assault, the relationship strained. For years, the haunting did not let up, and the Bell House became a kind of dark tourist attraction. In a world without television, radio, or internet, word of something like the bell, which spread the only way gossip can, from mouth to mouth, cross fields, in churchyards, at markets. Soon, people were riding in from miles around to experience the phenomenon for themselves. Some came out of curiosity, some out of morbid fascination, some genuinely seeking proof of the supernatural. Others came armed with scripture and skepticism, determined to expose a hoax. They were not prepared for an intelligence that could speak. People would sit in the bow living room by candlelight and ask the invisible voice questions. It answered, sometimes correctly. Sometimes trickster is HLY. It claimed to know the Bible from Genesis to Revelation and argued complex points of doctrine. It discussed events in far-off towns other guests had just traveled from, mentioning details that had supposedly occurred after those guests had left. On one occasion, according to some versions of the story, a man from England who doubted the spirit's claims demanded proof. "If you truly are what you say," he challenged, "tell me what is happening back at my home right now." The witch reportedly described in chilling detail what his family was doing that evening in England's descriptions that were later, so the legend says, confirmed by letters. It seemed fascinated by the Bible, but also took sadistic joy in mocking believers. It would interrupt prayers with crude remarks. It would loudly repeat sinners' private confessions. It would laugh during sermons. And it was not just talk. It physically interacted with the world. Objects moved. Water splashed from a bucket on the other side of the room. Food was snatched from people's plates. Hair was pulled, ears boxed, noses tweaked, skirts flipped up, leaving women humiliated in front of laughing neighbors and a cackling, invisible entity. It showed a softer side occasionally. Lucy Bell, John's wife, was one of the few people the witch seemed to respect, even like. It called her the most perfect woman to walk the earth, and would sometimes sing quietly to her when she was ill. On nights when Lucy was bedridden, visitors reported seeing food mysteriously appear at her bedside fruit she craved, but that was not in season, or small treats the family could not afford. For all its cruelty, the witch seemed capable of kindness in narrow, unpredictable ways. That made it harder to pin down. Was this a demon? A human ghost? A trickster spirit? Multiple entities? Whatever it was, it loved an audience. And then, according to the legend, a very famous audience member arrived. Andrew Jackson was not president yet. In 1819 to 1820, he was a military hero, a controversial and powerful figure who had led American troops to victory in the Battle of New Orleans, and was later elected the 7th President of the United States. According to one of the most enduring pieces of Bell Witch lore, Jackson heard so much about the haunting in Robertson County that he decided to investigate for himself. The story goes like this. Jackson and a group of men, some armed, some on horseback, travel to the Bell farm, eager to test their courage. Along the way, their wagon becomes stuck in the mud door, seemingly stuck. The horses strain, the wheels spin. The wagon sinks no deeper, but will not move. The men curse and shove. They cannot budge it. From nowhere, a sharp, mocking female voice rings out. "All right, General. You can go on now. I'll see you tonight." The wagon rolls free as if nothing had ever been wrong. Jackson, unnerved but intrigued, supposedly says, "By the eternal boys," that is, the Bell Witch. That night at the Bell House, the witch puts on a performance. It reportedly mimics every man's voice. It laughs at their war stories, calls out cowardice none of them have confessed, repeats details of their campaigns. It sings. It slaps one of Jackson's companions so hard he falls to the floor. It exposes another as a fraud, telling a story of a previous misdeed in front of everyone. According to some tellings, Jackson later says he would rather fight the entire British Army again than spend another night with the Bell Witch. Did this encounter truly happen? Historians debate it. The earliest written accounts mentioning Jackson and the Bell, which appeared decades after the supposed event. Some believe the story grew in the retelling, attaching a famous name to an already infamous haunting. But in legend, the image is powerful. America's future president, humbled by a disembodied voice in a Tennessee farmhouse. Whether Jackson sat in that candlelit room or not, the bell, which had already done something profound, it made people question who exactly was in charge of the Bell home. And that brings us to John. From the moment the spirit found its voice, it made one thing clear. It wanted John Bell dead. He began to suffer strange physical symptoms not long after the haunting escalated. His mouth would contort, his tongue swell, his jaw locked so tight he could not speak. He had difficulty swallowing. His hands shook. He complained of a strange, prickling sensation on his face, as if invisible pins were being stuck into his skin. Doctors were called. This was the early 1800s. Medical knowledge was limited. They suspected a neurological disorder, perhaps a nervous condition. Some treated him with the crude medicines of the time. Nothing helped. Sometimes he would recover partially. Other times his speech would simply stop mid-sentence. The witch delighted in his suffering. Whenever John tried to pray at the table or read scripture, the voice would taunt him, mimicking his slurred speech, laughing when his tongue failed him. It would shout, "Old Jack Bell will never say another word." It constantly repeated its promise to kill him, not just in private, but in front of visitors. Over the years, John's condition worsened. By December of 1820, he was nearly an invalid. He had trouble eating. He slept fitfully, racked by tremors and choking fits. His family watched helplessly. The witch's gloating commentary echoing through the house. On the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell did not wake up. He was found in his bed, cold and unresponsive. On a table near his bedside, the family found a mysterious vial filled with dark liquid they did not recognize. No one could account for it. One of the sons, John Jr., decided to test it. He placed a drop on the tongue of a cat. The cat convulsed and died almost instantly. From somewhere in the house, the witch screamed with triumphant glee. I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him. At John Bell's funeral, as mourners gathered on the bleak winter day around the open grave, the witch's voice, so the story goes, rang out clearly over the sobs and prayers. It sang not a hymn of comfort, a rowdy drinking song it had been heard singing before when, in mocking mood, belting the verses out loud and proud until the last clod of dirt thudded onto the coffin. Of all the things in this story, that image, that sound, the one that may stay with you longest. A graveyard, a grieving family, and an invisible presence celebrating among the stones. Was John Bell murdered by a spirit? Officially, his death certificate lists unknown causes. The era's doctors could not agree. Modern theorists have pointed to possible illnesses: neurological disease, stroke, poisoning by a human hand. Some have suggested one of his own family members, driven to desperation, may have slipped him something in the night. But inside the Bell home, among the people who heard the warnings every day, who saw the vial, who watched the cat die, there was no doubt. The bell which had kept its promise, and it was not finished. In the months leading up to John's death, Betsy's torment also intensified. The witch had violently opposed her relationship with Joshua Gardner from the beginning. Every attempt to discuss marriage was met with shrieking, slaps, and physical attacks on Betsy. The entity would not stop whispering in her ear day and night, warning her of disaster if she married Joshua. It insulted Joshua whenever he was near, calling him names, telling him he was not worthy. It would not allow them a moment's peace. After John's death, perhaps already worn thin by years of nightly abuse, Betsy finally caved. She broke off the engagement. "I will never marry Joshua Gardner," she reportedly told the witch's listening presence, tears in her eyes. The witch reacted with laughter and applause, shouting, "That's right, Betsy. Now I will leave you alone." Some say that after the engagement ended, the spirit's cruelty toward Betsy lessened. Still present, still mocking, but no longer focused on her with the same vicious intensity. Over the next few months, the overall activity in the Bell house began to decline. The knocks, scratches, and voices that had once overwhelmed the family grew rarer. The night grew quieter. One evening in 1821, about a year after John's death, the witch announced, in its now familiar, disembodied tone, that it was leaving, but not forever. It promised to return in 7 years, and then just like that, was gone. The Bell family experienced something almost as frightening as the haunting itself. Silence. If you have lived with constant terror for 4 long years, silence is not peaceful at first. It is suspicious. They waited, night after night, for the knocks to come back, for the blankets to rip away, for the rasping voice to boom from the rafters. Months passed. Nothing. Seasons changed. Neighbors stopped visiting, or at least stopped visiting for that reason. By the mid-teen 20s, the Bell Witch story became, like all wild stories do, a mix of memory and legend told in rocking chairs and at church socials, half warning, half entertainment. But those who had lived through it counted the years. 7 years, exactly, the entity had promised. They did not forget, and, according to some, neither did it. In 1828, exactly 7 years after it said farewell, the witch reportedly returned. Not with the same ferocity, not with the same nightly assaults, but with brief, intense flashes of its old self, mostly focused on John Bell, Jr. It is said to have appeared to him in conversation, discussing the past, the present, and even, bizarrely, topics like world events and religion. John Jr. was, by then, an adult with his own household. He later claimed that in those weeks, the spirit spent much of its time with him, sharing opinions on spiritual matters, philosophizing, even offering predictions about the future. According to one account, it accurately foresaw events like the American Civil War. Among others, not in detail, but in eerie broad strokes. Then, just as suddenly as before, it declared it was leaving again. This time, it said it would be gone for 107 years. If you do the math, that would put its next visit around 1935. Did that happen? The 1930s did see a renewed interest in the Bell Witch story. Articles appeared in local papers. Folks around Adams and Robertson County told of strange occurrences near the old Bell farm and in a particular cave on the property. Some claimed descendants of the Bell family still experienced odd phenomena. Others claimed the witch had settled in the cave itself, using it as a kind of lair. But there was no 4-year siege like before. No nightly attacks. No new John Bell. What there was, however, is a physical place where the legend seemed to cling, a dark hole in the earth near the Red River, not far from where the Bell House once stood, the Bell Witch Cave. And that is where you find yourself now, standing at the entrance. In the present day, the Bell House is gone. Time and weather and the slow grind of history have wiped its logs away. The land is still there, as is the tiny community of Adams. But the exact footprint of the home, its walls, its floors. The bed where John died, now just grass, dirt, and the lingering weight of a story. The cave, however, remains small, unassuming, easy to miss if you did not know where to look. It crouches in the hillside, close to where the Bell property once was. Its mouth is a dark oval framed by stone and earth, with a narrow stream of water trickling from inside. Locals will tell you the witch was known to roam this cave even in the Bell's time. Some say the children used to play there, and that the spirit would sometimes appear to them in the gloom, warning them of danger or pulling pranks. One oft-told tale says that on one occasion, a boy became stuck in a narrow passage in the cave, unable to move. As his friends panicked and ran for help, he felt hands cool, firm, definitely real, gripping his legs and pulling him free. He looked up to see no one. A familiar voice chided him for his foolishness and told him to be more careful. Was that kindness or control? Whoever guided those hands, the story adds another strange wrinkle to the witch's persona. In the decades and centuries since, the cave has drawn ghost hunters, historians, skeptics, YouTubers, and thrill seekers, people who claim to be sensitive to the paranormal report, walking into a wall of energy at the entrance, a pressure shift, a sudden dizziness. Electronic devices malfunction, cameras fail, batteries drain. Tour guides share stories of visitors hearing whispers just over their shoulders in the darkness. Stones tossed from unseen corners, names called, laughs echoing from deeper inside when no one is there. Sometimes in the stillness of the cave, if you keep the group quiet and listen very carefully, you hear water dripping from the ceiling onto the cold rock floor. Drop, drop, drop. Then, just when you are starting to relax, a pebble skips across the tunnel in front of your feet. Where did it come from? Gravity, maybe, or something that doesn't want to be forgotten. The cave is a magnet for projection. People bring the Bell Witch story into its echoing belly and let their fears and hopes bounce back at them, amplified. Whether anything genuinely supernatural lingers there or not, it has become the physical heart of a legend that refuses to fade. You can stand in that dank, cool air and imagine very easily what it would have felt like to be Betsy Bell years earlier, clutching a flickering candle and hearing something call your name in the dark. And if you are unlucky, lucky, depending on what you came for, you might hear it too. What actually happened to the Bell family between 1817 and 1821? That question has haunted not just their descendants, but generations of folklorists, historians, and paranormal investigators. We have to be honest. Separating fact from fiction is almost impossible now. The earliest written account of the haunting, an authenticated history of the famous Bell Witch by M.V. Ingram, was published in 1890, for over 70 years after the events. It relies heavily on oral history, family stories, and a partial manuscript attributed to Richard Williams Bell, one of John's sons, who was only a boy during the original haunting. Memory over that length of time is not a perfect recording. It is a living thing. It grows, shifts, absorbs other stories. Details that were once small can become magnified. Others can be smoothed away or forgotten. Later tellers add color, exaggeration, even outright fiction. Does that mean nothing in the Bell Witch story is true? Not necessarily. It means we have layers. At the core, most historians agree on certain basic facts. The Bell family did exist. They lived near the Red River in Robertson County. John Bell was a real man, a farmer and church elder. He did suffer a mysterious illness and died in 1820 under somewhat unusual circumstances. There were rumors of strange happenings around the Bell farm, even during his lifetime. The family did believe they were tormented by some kind of spirit. From there, things get murkier. Some theories: 1. A human hoax, perhaps one or more members of the Bell family, or a close neighbor, orchestrated at least some of the phenomena. A clever child or relative with a talent for mimicry could have produced disembodied voices, knocks, and tricks. Motivations could have ranged from petty attention, amusement, revenge, to complex family dynamics, mental illness, stress. But if that is the case, it would have required staggering dedication, skill, and a willingness to torment loved ones for years, even to the point of contributing to a man's death. 2. Mass hysteria and suggestion. The early 1800s American frontier was a world steeped in religion and superstition. Revivals, camp meetings, talk of angels and demons. Once the idea took root that the Bell House was haunted, and especially once respected neighbors and ministers claimed to hear things people may have entered, the home primed to experience something themselves. In a dark room, in a tense atmosphere, every creak is loaded with meaning. Every stray draft becomes a touch. Every vague sound becomes a voice. Group psychology does the rest. 3. A combination. Perhaps some phenomena had mundane origins: a loose board, animals in the walls, someone playing pranks. Others may have been imagined under stress. Over time, the stories blended, grew, and hardened into a single narrative where everything was the work of one entity: the Bell Witch. 4. Something genuinely unexplained. Even the most skeptical accounts often include a line that sounds something like, "But there are still a few details we can't entirely explain objectively." It is not impossible that the Bells experience something that does not fit neatly into current scientific understanding. An unknown psychological condition, environmental factors affecting perception, or if you are open to it, something paranormal. If you talk long enough to locals in Adams, you will notice something. Many do not like to speak openly about the witch. They will laugh. They will roll their eyes. Then, when the recorder is off, they will tell you that their grandmother heard voices in that field, that their uncle refuses to go near the cave after a night they won't describe, that sometimes on certain still winter nights you can stand where the bell house once stood and hear the faint rhythm of knuckles on wood. It might be coyotes, it might be imagination, it might be something else. 5. A dark human crime covered by a ghost story. Some fringe theorists have suggested that the Bell Witch story may conceal deeper secrets: abuse, murder, scandal. In this view, the poltergeist becomes a metaphor, a socially acceptable way for a traumatized family to explain disordered experiences. For example, Betsy's torment could mask something far uglier by providing an external villain. John's illness and death could have had human roots, poison administered by someone close to him, wrapped in a supernatural narrative to deflect suspicion. There is no definitive evidence for this, but the possibility sits like a shadow behind the main tale, reminding us that sometimes the scariest part of a haunting is not the ghost. It is the people. What does feel clear, looking back, is that the Bell Witch story hit a nerve in the American imagination. It is, in many ways, the perfect frontier haunting. A devout family, an isolated farm, a voice that knows your secrets, a thing you cannot shoot, cannot reason with, cannot move away from easily. No police to call dot, no modern medicine, just you, your faith, your neighbors, and the darkness pressing in on the logs at night. That is why the story has been told and retold, reshaped into novels, movies, coda, whispered campfire tales, ghost tour scripts, and YouTube videos like the one you might be planning now, because it is not just a story about a witch punishing a family. It is a story about control. Who has it? Who loses it? Who claims it when the lights go out? You lock your front door at night because, instinctively, you believe that control over your space protects you from the unknown. But what happens when the enemy is already inside the walls? When the blows come from the headboard itself? When the voice calling your name is above you in the rafters? The Bell Witch reminds us of a very old fear, that no matter how solid your house feels, there might be something else living in it with you. Something that has been there longer than you have. Something that does not plan to leave just because you own the deed. So what do we do with this story now? We can stand at the edge of the empty field where the Bell cabin once sat, close our eyes, and feel the wind push against our jacket, carrying the smell of earth and old leaves. We can walk into the Bell Witch cave on a guided tour and listen for whispers around the bend. We can flip through fragile old books, reading accounts written by men who claimed to have heard the witch's voice with their own ears. We can try to explain it away. We can embrace it as legend. We can use it to scare ourselves, to feel that delicious cold shiver down the spine we secretly crave. But beneath all that, there is something else, something uncomfortable. Every haunting story is, at its core, about the place we call home turning against us. In Tennessee, in the early 1800s, the Bell House was supposed to be a sanctuary in a dangerous wilderness. It became a theater for something cruel and unpredictable. Right now, wherever you are watching from, your own home is, in theory, your sanctuary, your safe zone, your bubble of control in an uncontrollable world. The Bell Witch legend slips under that barrier and whispers, "Are you sure? Are you sure that sound in the hall is just the house settling? Are you sure that cold spot in the corner of your room is just a draft? Are you sure you are alone when you say certain things aloud?" In the Bell story, the trigger seems small. A strange animal in a field. A possible land dispute. Bad feelings. Cause and effect blur. Whatever the reason. One day, something started knocking on their walls and did not stop when they asked politely. If there is any lesson at all buried in this centuries-old tale, it might be this: pay attention to the first knock. Do not pretend nothing is wrong for 3 years while the problem grows teeth. Do not assume that just because the danger is invisible, it is not real. And maybe, just maybe, do not ever dare something out loud to show it selfless. You are truly prepared for an answer. Because, according to the Bells, when they finally acknowledged the thing in their house, it did not slink away. It pulled up a chair at the table and never shut up again. You pull your car to a stop near the cave parking area. The engine ticks as it cools. The night outside the windshield is thick and black. Somewhere down in the trees, water runs over a stone. Your phone buzzes once, then loses its signal. For a long moment, you just sit there, listening to the small, familiar sounds of your own vehicle. Your own breath, the faint hum of electricity still in the dash. You tell yourself there's nothing out there but history and rocks and old stories. Then, because you are human, you do the most irrational thing. You open the door, you step out into the darkness, and as your shoes crunch on the gravel, carrying you toward the mouth of the Bell Witch Cave, you are stepping not just into a physical space, but into a story that has been scaring people for over 200 years. Whether you believe in it or not, that story believes in you. It is already waiting, eternal as a voice in the dark, ready to ask you a question that has no safe answer. Do you want to hear me? Just remember one thing. If, later tonight, lying in your own bed, miles away, you feel fingers gently tug the edge of your blanket, if you hear slow, deliberate knocks traveling up your headboard. If a voice you do not recognize leans close to your ear and whispers a hymn you have not heard since childhood, you were the one who went looking. And in the Bell Witch's world, people who go looking for her name seldom come away untouched. Sleep well.